The story begins with shattered mirrors reflecting the past of the main character Ghislaine. He sits in a room filled with destroyed furniture, frustration clear on his face. The scene shifts to a king, shocked and defeated by Ghislaine. The king demands to know if Ghislaine had foreseen his plan, but Ghislaine replies with cold confidence, claiming he knew everything from the start. In disbelief and anger, the king shouts at him, only for Ghislaine to silence him with a foot, revealing his face. A year earlier, in the kingdom of Luthania near the Peridium estate, Ghislaine finds himself alive and in shock, checking his body. Just moments ago, he had been defeated by one of the continent's top 7 warriors, the noble knight Idun. Lying on the ground, barely clinging to life, Ghislaine exchanged words with the knight, who revealed a plot to destroy his family. Enraged, Ghislaine cursed them, but the knight mercilessly decapitated him. Back in the present, Ghislaine touches his neck, bewildered, and questions where he is. As he surveys his surroundings, he notices someone approaching, a Peridian soldier named Ricardo. Without warning, Ghislaine holds a sword to the soldier's neck, demanding answers. To his surprise, Ricardo remains calm, explaining that Ghislaine had taken a nap and thrown a tantrum about leading the group to raid the orcs. Puzzled, Ghislaine continues to ask questions while Ricardo cleans up the mess around him. When Ghislaine inquires where Ricardo is heading with his belongings, the soldier casually mentions the Peridium estate. Shocked, Ghislaine asks him to repeat himself, confirming the name. Soon after, he stands atop a hill overlooking the estate. Ricardo warns him not to call his household a fallen one, as it could lead to him being kicked out, causing Ghislaine to sweat nervously. He pinches his cheeks, trying to confirm if he's dreaming, and begins to suspect that he has traveled back in time. Reflecting on his past, Ghislaine remembers how, as a younger man, he had resented his household and, feeling inferior, eventually ran away. Years later, after surviving countless battles and building a reputation as a mercenary, he returned to Peridium County, only to find his home destroyed and everything he cared for lost. But now, standing before the estate, he realizes that it's all still here. Everyone he holds dear is still alive. Though he longs to rejoice, there are pressing matters at hand, the orc raid. In his past life, this very day had been a tragedy. Ghislaine had followed the raid squad, hoping to make a name for himself. The initial report had mentioned only 3 orcs, a task he thought would be easy enough, even with his lack of experience. But when they arrived, over 20 orcs awaited them, and Ghislaine's stubbornness and inexperience as a leader had led to the deaths of nearly everyone. Now faced with the same scenario, Ghislaine wonders if the squad will trust him, given that they all view him as a useless failure. Suddenly, a hut is thrown, crashing down in front of him. The orcs have arrived. Chaos erupts as the soldiers are massacred. The raid squad commander, Scoven, calls for calm, urging his men into defensive formations, but he hadn't expected such an ambush. Just then, a shout draws Scoven's attention. An orc raises its axe to strike him down. In a flash, Ghislaine moves, slicing off the orc's arm, stunning everyone. The orc falls to the ground, screaming in pain. Ghislaine reaches out his hand to Scoven, demanding command of the raid. Ghislaine demands the right to command the squad, but Scoven, the commander, hesitates and refuses. "What?" Ghislaine responds, irritated as the commander's distrust becomes obvious. Just as an orc approach, Scoven prepares for defense, stating that Ghislaine lacks the experience to lead. Unfazed, Ghislaine sighs and readies his sword. He throws it, causing Scoven to dodge, shouting, "What the hell are you doing?" But before the commander can react, he notices the orc behind them fall, the sword lodged in its head. Scoven is stunned, unable to believe what he just witnessed. Ghislaine then asks Scoven, "What's the most important thing in battle?" He continues, "There's no hope of winning when our troops are filled with fear. We need to gain momentum." Without waiting for a response, Ghislaine dashes forward, pulls his sword from the dead orc, and leaps into the fray. With a swift strike, he kills another orc, shocking both the squad and the commander. Ghislaine taunts the remaining orcs to come at him, and they charge in fury. What follows leaves the soldiers speechless. Ghislaine fights the orcs alone, cutting them down with precision. Scoven watches in disbelief, unable to grasp what he's seeing. Ghislaine, though visibly tired, uses the smallest movements to dodge attacks and strikes each orc at its weakest point. The commander, awestruck, begins to see Ghislaine not just as a skilled fighter, but as something greater, a master of the sword, perhaps even without the aid of mana. As the orcs continue to fall, Ricardo shouts in panic. All of the orcs are charging at the young master. Scoven snaps out of his shock and orders the troops to form a shield wall and follow Ghislaine. Meanwhile, Ghislaine parries attacks as he leads the orcs toward the edge of a cliff. With a smirk, he glances back, seeing the soldiers now in formation, charging toward the orcs with their shields raised. At the cliff's edge, Ghislaine jumps, and the soldiers push the orcs off, sending them plummeting to their deaths. As the soldiers catch their breath, Scoven shouts, "Young master." Only then does he see Ghislaine hanging from the cliffside, gripping his sword with a smirk. Before the commander can reach out to help, Ghislaine's grip slips and he falls, leaving the troops screaming in alarm. Suddenly, Ghislaine finds himself in a dreamlike state, hearing someone call him Appa. He realizes these are the memories of Elena, and before he can react, Elena grabs his hand, urging him, "Let's go together." Ghislaine jolts awake, now in a room. His body aches from the strain of pushing himself beyond his limits. A maid, Belinda, enters the room, expressing her worry. Without thinking, Ghislaine pulls her into a hug, startling her. "Is something wrong?" she asks. Belinda had been his personal tutor since he was young, one of the few who remained by his side despite his reckless behavior. After the fall of his family, she disappeared, and Ghislaine never saw her again until now. He holds her tightly, feeling the need to share the truth. "I died, and I came back to life," he tells her. But Belinda brushes off his statement as nonsense, scolding him and straightening his bed. She reminds him about the upcoming festival, adding that Lady Elena has been eagerly waiting to attend the event with him. Belinda suggests that it would be a great chance for them to grow close again. Looking at a picture, Ghislaine reflects on how, in his past life, he never had the time to enjoy festivals, burdened by traumatic experiences. How long until the festival? He asks. "About a week," Belinda answers. Just then, someone knocks at the door. It's Elena, and as she enters, Ghislaine is reminded of the haunting memory that continues to trouble him. Ghislaine suddenly hugs Elena, startling both her and Belinda. Blushing, Elena wonders what kind of prank this is. Ghislaine, still holding her, tells her how much he missed her. Shocked by his sudden affection, Elena pushes him back with surprising strength, making Ghislaine hold his chest and remark on how strong she is. Elena, however, gets straight to the point, saying that this won't make things right. Ghislaine, confused, asks, "Make what okay?" Elena reminds him of something hurtful he had said to her the last time they spoke. Realizing what she means, Ghislaine nervously touches his neck and apologizes, surprising both Alana and Belinda. It's the first time they've ever heard him apologize. As Ghislaine tries to defend his actions, his body begins to ache again from the exertion of his earlier battle. While he winces in pain, Elena teases him, though both she and Belinda smile, which makes Ghislaine happy. He quietly reflects on why he had wasted so much time on meaningless things in his past life. Just then, there's a knock at the door. Elena's bodyguards have come to check on her. They explain that the servants need help overseeing the festival preparations, and they were sent to fetch her. Ghislaine, surprised, asks why they're relying on Elena for that. Belinda chimes in, pointing out that since he's always been lazy, he wouldn't know that the household is short on workers, and even Elena has to help. Ghislaine wonders how bad things must be. As Elena prepares to leave, Ghislaine surprises everyone by volunteering to help. Elena blushes, and both she and Belinda are shocked Ghislaine has never offered to help before. We then shift to the festival grounds, where Ghislaine inadvertently scares the workers, prompting Elena to push him aside, telling him to stay out of their way. As she presses his face, Ghislaine can't help but think about Elena's death, which he's determined to prevent. But first, he needs to understand the layout of the castle and figure out who the traitors are. As Ghislaine contemplates, an old man named Fergus calls out to him. Ghislaine remembers Fergus, and the old man, overwhelmed with joy and tears, rambles on. Elena asks Fergus to take Ghislaine back to his room, which annoys him. Instead, Ghislaine requests to be taken to the training grounds. Fergus, confused, asks why. Ghislaine simply replies, "To train," surprising the old man. At the training field, Ghislaine surveys the area and deems it perfect for what he needs. After exchanging a few words with Fergus, Ghislaine sends him away so he can begin his training in earnest. Ghislaine reflects on his past life, remembering that the one behind Elena's death was a lord from a neighboring territory. Her death had triggered a war, which eventually led to the downfall of the Peridium family. Elena's death, he realized, was the starting point of their house's ruin. Determined to change fate, Ghislaine begins his training, focusing on strengthening his body and mastering his mana. In his previous life, Ghislaine had discovered the ability to absorb mana during battle, creating a powerful mana core. Now he pushes his limits, attempting to form multiple cores. Laughing with exhilaration, he successfully creates 3 cores. But his victory is short-lived as blood pours from his mouth and knows 3 cores are his limit for now. Ghislaine recognizes this as the main reason he lost to Idun in his past life. If it had been a fair fight, without running out of mana, he's certain he would have won, even against an entire Knight Order. With renewed determination, he vows to take revenge on those responsible for his family's downfall. A week later, on the day of the festival, Ghislaine meets with Elena. She playfully teases him about his recent training, noting how he used to hate such things and only wanted to inherit the title of Lord. Flustered, Ghislaine laughs it off but reflects on how his actions have changed and how he's using his knowledge of the future to guide him. Together, they enjoy the festival, but Ghislaine remains tense, waiting for the moment when things should go wrong. As they stop by a staircase, Elena comments on how there's nothing new this year, while Ghislaine anxiously wonders why nothing suspicious has happened yet. Just then, Elena's bodyguards approach, suggesting they check out some new events elsewhere. Elena agrees and goes with them, but Ghislaine watches them closely. His suspicion is confirmed. It was these 2 who betrayed the house. Elena's 2 escort knights, Jamal and Philip, had always been the most trusted protectors of the feud, having guarded Elena since she was a child. It was well known in Ghislaine's previous life that they were killed while trying to protect Elena. As they arrive at the place they promised to bring her, Elena glances around, growing irritated when she sees no one is there. The guards assure her that people will arrive soon, but Ghislaine remains vigilant, scanning the surroundings with suspicion. His instincts are correct. Suddenly, Elena grabs Ghislaine's arm, dragging him away as she throws a tantrum, frustrated by the empty space. Ghislaine, slightly amused, asks her if she's been working out because of her strength, which only irritates her further. But before she can respond, the second guard, Philip, steps in front of them with a menacing expression. His tone changes as he asks Elena to wait just a little longer. Sensing something is off, Elena backs away, telling him they're acting strangely. At that moment, both knights reveal their true colors. They've received a reasonable request. 3 shadowy figures emerge from the darkness, approaching them. Ghislaine instantly recognizes them as the ones who requested Elena be brought to this isolated spot. One of the men looks at Ghislaine with disdain, questioning why he's there. Jamal, cold and indifferent, offers Ghislaine to them for free, mocking him for foolishly following without realizing this would be his grave. Ghislaine, unfazed, glares at Jamal. "So you sold us out," he says calmly. He adds, "Do you really think you'll get away with this?" Jamal, clearly uninterested in Ghislaine's defiance, ignores his words, insisting Ghislaine should worry about himself. Jamal declares he's had enough of their impoverished land, which has been constantly tormented by barbarians. But before he can continue, Ghislaine suddenly moves, slicing Jamal cleanly in half. The group is shocked, and even Elena is left speechless. Ghislaine, standing firm, shifts his focus to Philip, who is holding Elena. Philip, still in disbelief over Jamal's death, freezes in place. In a swift motion, Ghislaine hurls his sword directly at Philip's head, killing him instantly. The three mysterious men, alarmed by what just transpired, stare at Ghislaine. They hadn't realized they were dealing with the eldest son of the Peridium family. Ghislaine gently puts Elena to sleep, ensuring she won't witness the next moments of bloodshed. The leader of the group praises Ghislaine's efficiency in disposing of his former allies, but does so with a calculating smirk. With his sword still embedded in Philip's corpse, Ghislaine calmly retrieves it. He eyes the three men, noting that the leader is the real threat due to the overwhelming mana emanating from him. "This needs to end quickly," Ghislaine mutters to himself. One of the lackeys asks the leader if they should sever Ghislaine's head, but the leader shakes his head, smirking. "Capture him alive. We'll torture him later." The two lackeys charge at Ghislaine. Without hesitation, Ghislaine tosses a firecracker, but it's just a decoy. As one of the attackers focuses on the explosion, Ghislaine slashes his face, disorienting him. The second attacker sees through the trick, launching an attack at Ghislaine, but Ghislaine skillfully blocks the strike and quickly counters, beheading the second man in a single motion. Now only the leader remains. He rushes at Ghislaine with an immense burst of mana, but Ghislaine fends off his assault, catching the leader off guard. Ghislaine counters, his blade aiming for the leader's neck, but the man dodges at the last second. He retaliates, healing his wound almost instantly, which shocks Ghislaine. Did he focus his mana around his neck to reduce the damage? Ghislaine speculates. The leader, now deadly serious, glares at Ghislaine. "You shall die here," he snarls. But Ghislaine stands his ground, gripping his sword tightly, ready for the next deadly exchange. The leader grinned wickedly, surprised by his narrow escape. "I'm impressed. If I hadn't enhanced my body with mana, my head would be rolling on the floor right now." He tightened his grip on his sword as he and Ghislaine prepared to clash again. With arrogance, he declared, "You'll die here." Ghislaine, however, merely smiled, unsettling the leader. In a fluid motion, Ghislaine parried the leader's blade downward, using the momentum to land a powerful kick to the leader's face. The leader was thrown back, but his overconfidence remained. He believed the attack hadn't caused any real damage until blood spewed from his mouth. He began coughing up blood, bewildered by what had just happened. Ghislaine casually walked toward the stunned leader, his eyes cold and calculating. As he prepared his next attack, he unleashed the full power of his third mana core. The leader, now gritting his teeth, demanded, "How did you boost your mana like that?" Ghislaine remained silent, ignoring the question as he launched his attack. The two clashed once again, but this time the leader was being pushed back, the pressure overwhelming him. Cracks began forming in the leader's sword as he struggled to hold his ground. With one final charged blow, Ghislaine shattered the leader's sword and slashed him across the chest. The leader stumbled backward, but before he could collapse, Ghislaine swiftly pinned him against a wall. His cold gaze bore into the leader's eyes. "Now let's finish our conversation. Who ordered this assassination?" Still defiant, The leader reached for a hidden knife, his intent clear to kill Elena before he went down. But before he could make his move, thin strings wrapped around his arms, binding him tightly. It was one of Ghislaine's skills. "Don't waste your energy," Ghislaine warned, his voice icy. The leader struggled, but the strings held firm. Panic began to settle in when Ghislaine, with ruthless precision, destroyed the leader's mana core. The leader gasped in horror, feeling his mana dissipating uncontrollably. "What are you doing?" he screamed. "If you're trying to self-destruct us both." Ghislaine cut him off coldly. "Self-destruction is for the unskilled," he said, his eyes gleaming. "I can control it." The leader, realizing that Ghislaine was serious, broke down, his arrogance shattered by fear. "It was Count Desmond," he finally confessed. "He ordered the assassination. He needed an excuse to start a war with Peridium and the Guard families." Ghislaine's mind raced as he processed the information. So it was the work of that Duke all along, he thought grimly. Now that he had the answer, Ghislaine showed no mercy. He tightened his grip on his sword, and the leader's eyes widened with disbelief. "But you promised," the leader stammered. "You've killed plenty in your time," Ghislaine replied coldly. "Yet you're afraid when it's your turn?" The leader, knowing his end was near, let out a hollow laugh. "It won't matter if you kill me. Nothing will change. The wheels are already in motion. The Degard family has already begun." Ghislaine calmly grabbed the leader's face, his eyes gleaming with a chilling finality. "I was reborn after dying," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "This time, it will be different." The leader screamed, but his voice was drowned out as fireworks exploded in the sky, celebrating the festival in the distance. Ghislaine let out a deep breath, lowering his sword. But suddenly, blood spurted from his mouth. The strain of maintaining 3 mana cores was taking its toll on his body. Wiping the blood from his lips, Ghislaine quickly moved. He burst through a nearby door, revealing 2 dead bodies. His eyes narrowed. This was the leader's final trick. He had planned to frame Ghislaine's family for the murders, igniting the flames of war. Ghislaine understood that the moment these bodies were discovered, conflict would erupt, as the evidence would implicate his house. But Ghislaine wasn't about to let the Count's plans unfold. He pulled out a firecracker, lighting it and throwing it onto the bodies. The explosion engulfed the room in flames, erasing the evidence and sealing his resolve. He would not allow things to unfold as the Count had intended. As the building burned, a shadowy figure watched from the distance, hidden in the darkness. With a final glance at the scene, the figure silently slipped away, leaving Ghislaine unaware of their presence. The first steps of a greater war had been avoided, but the battle was far from over. The scene transitions to a shadowy room, where the man who had been observing Ghislaine earlier stands before his superiors. He delivers his report, detailing how the attempt to instigate war had failed, and it was all because of Ghislaine's unexpected strength. One of the superiors sneers. "Ghislaine? That useless piece of trash? Are you really blaming him for your failure?" The man, maintaining his composure, insists he was completely different from the information and rumors we had. His abilities, they've drastically improved. Despite his explanation, the rest of the council scoffs. "Excuses," one of them mutters, while another crosses their arms and says, "This plan has already started. We can't risk another failure." The man quickly assures them, "I understand, but I have a solution. Give me one more chance." The room falls silent as the leader of the council, a figure cloaked in authority, speaks. "What do you want?" The leader asks, their voice sharp and demanding. "I'll kill Ghislaine," the man states with cold determination. "How?" the leader inquires, leaning forward slightly. "In a duel," the man responds confidently. "We will have Cain Loges do it. He's famous for his strength-based swordsmanship. And more importantly, he's Ghislaine's cousin. No one will question them meeting." The leader considers this for a moment before nodding slowly. Fine, but do not fail us again. You won't get another warning. The scene shifts back to Ghislaine, who is in the training hall once again, honing his skills. The old man Fergus enters the room, reminding him that mealtime is approaching. Ghislaine, absorbed in his thoughts, doesn't immediately respond. A string of mana flicks the swords into their racks, catching Fergus's attention. What did you do just now? Fergus asks curiously. Ghislaine explains, it's a mana string, a technique I've been working on. The old man, a seasoned warrior who had trained his mana for years, raises his eyebrows in surprise. I've never seen anything like that in all my years, he admits. Then, unexpectedly, Fergus bows low. Thank you for protecting the young lady. A few days pass. The next scene opens with Elena, clearly irritated, pacing around. Everyone thinks I'm lying when I say you were the one who saved me, she complains to Ghislaine. Say something about it, would you? Even the maid standing nearby, still shocked by the betrayal of the two bodyguards, looks at Ghislaine as if hoping for confirmation. Ghislaine, lost in thought, reflects on how he was able to prevent the war for now. But he knows his enemies won't stop, they'll try again. He can't handle everything alone. I need to build a military force of my own, he thinks. Suddenly, a maid enters the room and interrupts, bringing food. As the meal is prepared, Ghislaine notices something odd. Why are we getting desserts first? He asks. Belinda is about to explain when a loud shout comes from outside the castle gate. Someone is demanding compensation for the damages caused by the sudden cancellation of the festival. Ghislaine quickly rises, alarmed, and rushes to check what's happening outside. Belinda explains, the county is full of merchants who make their living from the festival's profits. Now that the festival was cancelled after just one day, they're understandably upset. Ghislaine mutters to himself, is the county situation really this bad? He knows he needs to act quickly. He turns to Fergus. What are the soldiers doing? Send them down to calm the crowd. But Fergus replies grimly, we don't have any soldiers. They've all been dispatched to the Forest of Monsters post for reconstruction. The weight of the situation hits Ghislaine. No soldiers, no money, and now an angry crowd. Desperate, he pulls Belinda aside and asks her to dip into whatever funds she manages. But to his dismay, Belinda explains, there's nothing left. The Count cut off your allowance because you spent money like water. Realizing he's broke, Ghislaine's mind races. I need to find a solution, fast. Just then, a servant rushes into the room, breathless. Young Master Kane wishes to see you. Ghislaine's heart skips a beat. Kane, his cousin. The same cousin the mysterious man mentioned earlier. Ghislaine follows the servant to the courtyard, where he witnesses the commander being punched mercilessly by Kane. Their eyes meet across the courtyard. A moment of tension hangs between them, two cousins, bound by blood, but possibly now destined to clash in a duel that could change everything.